Olivia Brooks vanished on a quiet Thursday evening, and Mark Hanley thought he had planned the perfect crime. But what he didn't know was that the girl locked in his cabin wasn't just another victim. She was a true crime fanatic who had spent years studying men like him, and now, trapped miles from civilization, Olivia was about to turn the tables using every survival tactic she'd learned from the darkest corners of the internet. The evening Olivia Brooks disappeared began like any other. The skies over Fairview were heavy with clouds, threatening rain, and the streets glowed dimly under the orange haze of streetlights. Olivia had just finished her shift at Whitmore Books, a small independent bookstore where she worked part-time after school. It was quiet that night, too quiet for a Thursday. She locked the store, waved goodbye to her manager through the glass door, and walked briskly to the parking lot. Her small silver car waited for her beneath a flickering lamp. She never made it home. At first, her parents thought she was running late. Olivia was responsible, but not obsessive about time. Maybe she had stopped for gas or gone to see a friend. But by midnight, worry crept in. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. Her mother tried her friends. No one had heard from her. Her father drove the route from the bookstore to their house twice. Still no sign. They called the police by 2 a.m. By morning, the town was buzzing with rumors. Olivia's car was found in the bookstore parking lot. The keys were still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat. Strangest of all, her phone lay on the ground nearby, screen shattered as if dropped or stomped on. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, and no security footage from that corner of the lot. It was like she had simply vanished. Detectives canvassed the area. They questioned co-workers, family members, classmates. They scoured nearby roads and trails with search dogs. The community banded together, printing missing posters, organizing search parties, and creating social media campaigns. Olivia's face, brown hair, clear green eyes, and a kind smile, was everywhere. But there were no leads. No one saw a suspicious vehicle. No neighbors reported screams. No tire marks, no footprints. To those who knew her, Olivia was calm, clever, and deeply curious. She had no enemies, no secrets that anyone knew of. Her love of true crime stories was something of a quirk, a hobby that once seemed harmless. She'd often tell her friends that if she were ever kidnapped, she'd know what to do. But now those words echoed with a chilling weight. Days passed. Police expanded the search perimeter. Olivia's parents appeared on the news, pleading through tears. But the case quickly began to grow cold. Every lead dried up. Every theory led nowhere. For the first time in decades, the quiet town of Fairview felt unsafe. What no one knew was that Olivia was still alive. She was miles away, in a cabin that didn't exist on any map. Her captor believed he had done everything perfectly, that he had taken someone vulnerable, someone easily broken. But he had made a mistake. He had taken someone who had already studied men like him, someone who had spent years watching the darkest parts of human behavior and had memorized the ways survivors stayed alive. The clock was ticking, but Olivia wasn't panicking. She was planning. Olivia's eyes opened slowly to the dull light, filtering through a boarded window. Her head throbbed, and her arms felt heavy. As her vision adjusted, she realized she was lying on a thin mattress in a small windowless room with wooden walls. The air was cold and stale, and the only sound was the faint creak of footsteps above her. Her hands were free, but the door across the room was locked. She sat up carefully, heart pounding, trying to piece together what had happened. It came, back in flashes. The walk to her car, the sudden hand over her mouth, the darkness. The rest was blank. Panic swelled in her chest, but she forced it down. She had seen this moment in dozens of documentaries and crime shows. She knew that fear would only waste energy. She needed to stay calm, stay sharp, and learn everything she could. The room was simple, almost deliberately plain. No windows except for the slats of light leaking in above. A small metal bucket in one corner. A heavy bolt on the outside of the door. No cameras, but she couldn't be sure. Olivia stood slowly, testing her balance, and began to examine every inch of the space. She counted floorboards. She checked the walls for loose panels. She pressed her ear to the door and listened. The footsteps returned. She heard the door unlock, with a metallic clank, and then it creaked open. A man stood there, middle-aged, average build, dressed plainly. His face was calm but unreadable. He didn't speak. He simply placed a tray on the floor, food, water, and closed the door again. Olivia sat frozen until she heard the lock click again. She waited a full minute before approaching the tray. The water was clean, the food basic, but untouched. She remembered cases where victims had been drugged. She waited another hour before eating, just in case. Her mind worked constantly, cycling through everything she knew. She didn't know where she was, but judging by the air, the wood walls, and the muffled bird calls, she was somewhere rural, maybe deep in the woods. Every hour, she tested the door again. Every visit from her captor, she observed him closely, his walk, his expression, his habits. She noticed he always wore gloves, and he never spoke. He didn't hit her. He didn't touch her. He seemed focused on control, on silence, on routine. That told her something important. He was methodical, careful, but not invincible. She began to plan, not escape, not yet, but something more important. She needed to get into his mind. If she could understand him, make him see her not as a threat, but as a person, she could buy herself time. Time to learn the pattern. Time to manipulate the cracks in his plan. She thought back to all the stories she had watched, all the survivors who endured worse. Olivia wasn't broken. She was alert. And from that moment on, she wasn't just his prisoner. She was his shadow, watching, remembering, waiting. The days blurred together inside the cabin, measured only by the creak of floorboards, the arrival of food trays, and the faint changes in light beyond the cracks in the boards. Olivia marked time by scraping small notches into the wall behind her mattress, using a splinter of wood she had pried from the floor. It helped her keep track, even as everything around her tried to blur into one long moment of helplessness. But Olivia refused to feel helpless. She began to change her behavior. At first, she remained quiet during each visit. She watched him carefully, how he stood, where he placed things, how long he stayed. She noticed he always looked at her closely before turning to leave, as if trying to read her emotions. She made sure to give him nothing, no fear, no pleading, just calm. After the third day, she offered her first word. "Thank you." It was quiet, controlled, deliberate. The next time he brought food, he lingered a second longer before leaving. Olivia remembered a case she'd seen on a documentary. A young woman who survived by convincing her captor they shared something in common. It wasn't about making him feel sorry. It was about making him feel seen. Humanizing herself without seeming manipulative. Olivia started small, commenting softly about the weather when he opened the door. When he didn't respond, she said, "Nothing else." She was patient. He eventually started leaving the door open just a little longer. One time, he watched her eat from behind it. She could feel his gaze, uncomfortable, but curious. That told her something valuable. He wanted control, but he also wanted validation. He was trying to see if she was breaking. She let him think she was, subtly, in ways that would make her seem compliant. She sat still. She made eye contact. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. Eventually, she made her first move. She told him she understood why he might have done this. Just that one sentence. It wasn't an apology, not sympathy, just an opening, a thread. That night, he left, a blanket folded neatly at the foot of the mattress. She knew it wasn't kindness. It was a sign that she was getting through. Her next step was even bolder. She asked if she could help clean. Not to escape, not yet, but to test boundaries. To get a look outside the room. She had seen cases where survivors had slowly earned their captor's trust until they were allowed small freedoms. That was the path she had to take. The more she became a part of his routine, the more predictable his actions would become, and the more opportunities she would have to break the pattern when it mattered most. She wasn't playing the victim. She was playing the role he wanted to see. Every word, every look, every step. Olivia calculated them all. She wasn't just surviving. She was moving pieces on a board he didn't know existed. The first time Olivia was allowed out of the room, the air struck her like a forgotten memory. The scent of pine, damp earth, and wood smoke told her more than words ever could. She was deep in the forest, far from roads or towns. The man, her captor, walked behind her, silent, always a few feet away, a pistol loosely tucked at his side. She didn't try anything. Not yet. She absorbed everything. The cabin was small but well built, a single-level structure surrounded by trees thick enough to block any view. No power lines, no visible driveway, just dirt and silence. She noted every window, every door, every piece of furniture. A rusty generator sat at the edge of the trees, silent now, but probably used at night. Inside, there were no mirrors, no photos, no signs of another life. It was a place made for disappearing. Back in the room later that evening, her heart raced with the effort of remembering every detail. She forced herself to focus. The man had let her help sweep the main room. He had watched her carefully but said nothing. She had noticed an old laptop on the kitchen table, closed but plugged in. The charger snaked across the floor to a wall outlet powered by the generator. It was the first real piece of technology she'd seen since arriving. The next day, she asked him if she could play music, just something quiet. She said it helped her stay calm. He didn't answer, but didn't say no. The day after, the laptop was left open. Music was playing softly when she entered the room to sweep again. She hid her excitement. This was her first chance. He stayed, in the kitchen, watching her from a distance. She moved slowly, deliberately, pretending to ignore the laptop. When his attention shifted for a moment, she approached it, hands steady, mind racing. No password, just a cluttered desktop with old folders. She opened Notepad and typed quickly, "Help. My name is Olivia Brooks. I was kidnapped. This message is real. Track this device." She saved the file under a generic name and left it open. She didn't close the program, didn't change anything else. The message was small, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to find it if he ever connected the device to the internet. Later, she remembered something else. He had once mentioned a name while talking to himself, pacing the hallway. Shadow Strike. Something. That sounded like a username. She committed it to memory. That night, while pretending to tidy a shelf, she asked him about it. He stiffened, then brushed it off. But she saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. She knew it meant something. The next time she had access to the laptop, she searched the name. It brought her to an old forum used by conspiracy theorists and amateur hackers. His profile was still there. She logged in and posted a message. The girl in the woods sees everything. Olivia B., 14 days. A riddle wrapped in fear, sent into the world like a flare in the dark. She didn't know who would see it, but someone would. Hundreds of miles away, in a cluttered bedroom lit only by a computer screen, a man named Travis Kemp sat scrolling through forum posts on a conspiracy thread he monitored daily. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't a hacker. He was just a man with time, a sharp eye, and a deep obsession with internet mysteries. When he saw the post from Shadowstrike, a username that hadn't been active in months, his interest sharpened. The message was strange. The girl in the woods sees everything. Olivia B., 14 days. It didn't fit the usual ramblings. What felt deliberate, clean, and too specific to be ignored. The name Olivia B. rang a bell. He opened a new tab and searched. The second result was a news article. High school senior Olivia Brooks missing for 14 days. Travis's skin prickled. The forum post had been made only minutes earlier. He took screenshots, archived the page, and dug into the account's activity. The post had been sent from an IP masked by a proxy, but not completely. There was a partial trace, enough to pin the signal to a wide rural area somewhere in the state of Oregon. Travis wasn't a hero, but he knew better than to sit on something like this. He compiled everything he had and submitted it to the FBI's tip line. Then he posted it to a subreddit dedicated to missing persons. Within hours, amateur sleuths around the country were dissecting every detail. Someone cross-referenced the username with another obscure forum and found an old comment about forest trails and going off-grid. It was vague, but the clues began to align. Meanwhile, in Fairview, Detective Jenna Hale had been losing hope. Leads had dried up. The search teams had stopped expanding the perimeter. Then the call came in. A digital tip with supporting data, screenshots, IP logs, forum history. At first, it sounded like the usual internet noise, but the timing, the username, and the name Olivia B. couldn't be ignored. The department reached out to the FBI's cybercrime unit. Within hours, the signal was tracked to a region of dense forest in western Oregon, national forest land, no homes, no known roads. It was enough for a warrant and a search order. The next morning, helicopters flew low over the woods. Ground teams pushed into areas too thick for drones. No cell towers, no GPS signal, just trees and silence. But on the third day, a ranger spotted what looked like a narrow dirt path, partly covered with fresh branches. It led to a cabin, old, hidden behind a cluster of thick pines, not visible from above. A car, half buried under a tarp, sat beside it. No license plates. They didn't move in right away. They waited, watched, took notes. The agents needed to know what they were walking into. But they had one critical piece of information now that changed everything. Olivia Brooks might be alive, and someone inside that cabin had made a very dangerous mistake.